It's 5 o'clock. Actually, it's 6 o'clock, going an hour later than usual. 6 o'clock California time, 9 o'clock Eastern time. So you know what time it is. Time for another episode of Erik Wait Live. Now, I typically like to keep things at 5 o'clock Pacific time so that even if people don't get the notice, they know I'm going live. Hey, it's 5 o'clock. Erik's on. Time to come on. It's good to stay regular. But when you've got guests on, particularly say over in the UK, Ireland, Scotland, you have to kind of adjust everything according to their schedule or somewhere else here in the United States. So I've got a special guest on, but before I bring him on, I want to talk about a few things. So recently I did a video on 10 tips for new whiskey drinkers. And at the end of that video, I recommended to new whiskey drinkers that they become familiar with 10 whiskey tubers. And it's kind of hard to choose 10, but the reason why I chose these 10 was because representatives from Scotland, Ireland, around the United States, and Canada. So different countries represented, whiskey channels with different emphasis. Scotch, bourbon, what I call generalists, that kind of cover everything, such as myself, as well as, and of course, Irish whiskeys. Then I also recommended that people, hey, if there's someone else that I haven't brought up, and I also put a list of other whiskey tubers I watched in the description for that live stream. Hey, if there's someone else you think I should watch, and choke on what? Choke on, don't talk and drink water at the same time. You'll choke. Excuse me. I got a drinking problem. I can't drink and talk at the same time. Drink some water, and I inhaled. And there you go. I did that because I'm a professional. All right. So I also put a list of other whiskey tubers that people should watch. And I said, hey, if there's someone who I haven't seen before, let me know. So a bunch of people sent recommendations. I checked out a bunch of other channels. And the thing is, right now, it used to be when Rafi first started, low quality audio, low quality video, but great content because the guy knows his whiskeys, right? He is the Yoda, the Jedi Master whiskey. But whiskey tuber world has expanded and grown, and people are really bringing their A game. You look at Jason, the mash and drum. I mean, real professional. A lot of these other guys, really high quality videos. So if you're coming onto the scene as a new whiskey tuber, and to get viewership, you really got to have something different. You got to really bring your own personality. You need to bring your gifts, your talents, your perspective, your angle, and really bring your A game. You got to get your stuff together. If you have terrible audio, boom, you're gone. If you have terrible video, boom, you're gone. If you're boring, boom, you're gone. If you don't have some enthusiasm, some knowledge, and you don't have your editing skills down, boom, people just aren't going to watch. So you actually need to do a lot of preparing and studying ahead of time and how to work the platform and how to do the video and all that. And to really bring good content, right? The advantage is because there are so many other whiskey tubers who we started off looking shitty and we've improved over time. You can now learn and benefit by watching whiskey tubers and not to copy them, not to imitate them, but to get inspired to really bring high quality content. So I was watching a bunch of recommended whiskey tubers that other people had recommended. I went through, I would say probably about 10 to 15 of them. And there were two that really stood out among the recommendations in terms of whiskey tubers who were quality content, delivery, editing, and everything else. So I've invited one. One was First Phil. He's down in New Zealand. That man, videographer, photographer, I mean, just pro. Editing pro. I mean, he's far beyond what I'm doing from that perspective. He has the skills of Peter McKinnon. Peter McKinnon, if you don't know who he is, he's a professional photographer, a videographer on YouTube up in Canada. I mean, just really pro. He brings those type of skills to Whiskey Tuber Land. He only has 19 videos, and yet he's got over 8,000 subscribers. Unfortunately, he doesn't put out content very often. I've sent him a message, hey, I'd like to have you on. He's responded. He says he's very busy. So we'll see how it goes with his channel. The other person that I was also recommended, and I started watching and checking them out, is tonight's guest. You know, you have guests and you have guests. Is guest, and that is. How you doing, man?
Good. How you doing?
For those who don't know you, because I'm mostly a Scotch channel, you're mostly a bourbon channel, although you've done Scotch as well. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Cameron Leach. I'm based out of Columbus, Ohio, and my channel is Drums and Drams. So I'm a professional musician, by day, and by night I drink too much whiskey, and I decided to do it on YouTube.
And he doesn't choke during his live streams like I do.
Man, that was funny. I like being backstage for that. But yeah, and you said I'm mostly bourbon, and that is very true right now. But that's a funny thing. I really kind of did that because I thought it was a good angle to take up front. But now I'm like, I want to get back to Scotch because that's my first love.
Really? So you actually Scotch first and then bourbon. I would have guessed the other way around.
Yeah, I was a Scotch drinker for probably a year before I ever really touched bourbon.
Oh, wow.
Beyond drinking in college, right? I mean, that's different. But
so in the whiskey tuber world, the bourbon channels are really, really, really taking off. They're doing really, really well. So I'm very eclectic in my music, everything from opera, classical, heavy metal, contemporary jazz, R&B, a little bit of country, Johnny Cash, not some of the stuff that's super twangy. Probably the only thing I don't listen to a whole lot of rap, but I'm very eclectic in my music. I want to talk a little bit about music with you as well. And I find a lot of correlations between music and whiskeys and wine. So I always like to talk about the two when I get the opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm very fortunate that way. And movies is what type of movies I like. I'm just there's not many categories of things out there that I don't like. And some things I'm immediately jumped into. Some things have taken time to sort of acquire. So with music, you're a drummer. Is there any particular style or genre of music that you're playing?
Yeah, so I'm actually a classical musician. I started off, as many of us do, sort of doing the drumline thing through high school and then drum corps. But I went in and I did a music education degree for my undergrad, and I was thinking I would be a band director. I love to teach. And a lot of that actually kind of plays into the whiskey stuff that I do, I think presentation-wise and communication. But after that, I went and did a master's degree in percussion performance. So I actually tour around and play solo recitals, like in a concert hall setting, and then I do master classes at universities, and I also play concertos, which are solo pieces with orchestras. So, but I mean, I'm a drum set player too. I grew up playing heavy metal, so
okay.
It's like all sorts of stuff wrapped up together. But yeah, tonight I was playing Mahler's Fourth Symphony before I came and got on.
You talked about that in your live stream that was coming up.
Yeah.
So it's funny. There's a number of drummers in the whiskey world. Well, the master blender, Nancy Fraley, she's a drummer. In fact, we talked a lot about drummer during Jason's live stream with her, which was just an amazing event, hanging out with Jason and Nancy.
Oh yeah.
Daniel Whittington is also a drummer. He also plays guitar and does vocals. In fact, I heard they're just starting to record again with his band. And of course, Jason C over at Master Drum is also a drummer. And I'm sure we've got some other drummers hanging out there. So let me say a quick hi to some of the viewers here. Tom R was the first to tune in. Ola, Tom, thanks for tuning in. Jack White, good to see you in. I know you were flying around last week, so you weren't in. Taylor, actually, thanks for tuning in. Michael C 2019. Michael, I'm curious, what is the C 2019? It sounds like it's like Elijah Craig barrel proof. I'm just wondering what the C 2019 stands for. Silverlock Whiskey Club, Judith Stoll, thanks for tuning in. Anthony, I was concerned about screwing up names. Mac Rientis, I'm probably screwing that up. Michael Gonzalez, how you doing, sir? Whiskey with two jerks. That's funny. Arm Smart's on. Sorry. Jack the Pickled Hound, how you doing? I love these names, man.
Yes.
Dirty Dog, how you doing? And Mitch Hassler, how you doing? Lito Cortez, Rick MQ, Noah, how you doing? And let's see if anybody got here. And of course, Drums and Drams, and Jared Riley is in the house. All righty. So let's talk a little bit about drumming. But before we do, So okay, I found out you're a drummer, so I was curious as to your style of drumming and so forth.
Mhm.
So I'm more of a vocals and guitar person, so I don't.
Yeah.
Of course, I know some of the big names. Neil Peart, big fan of Neil Peart, who passed away this
Mhm.
past year. But I was searching around on the internet, see if I could find any videos of anything of you, see if you're drumming, and I found a video clip of you drumming.
Like drum set?
Yeah, I found of you drumming, so I'm gonna share it with the viewers.
No. Oh no. I know. Is this really old?
Uh, I don't know how old you are, but here we go. So it looks like you're cutting your hair a little different these days.
Yeah. There's a lot of different stuff going on. The old me, I buried that person. That's in the past. That is hilarious. Oh my god. I honestly, for a second, I thought there's like a video online. Please, nobody look for this. It's from like 2007 when I was like 13 years old playing a metal show in town. I mean, it's
Okay.
old school. I was like, oh shit, Eric's got that. And that was much better.
Alrighty. So we'll talk whiskey and we'll talk about your channel, talk about your background, how you got into whiskey and so forth. So let me just share the notes real quick. The first one we're going to be doing, this is the Joseph Magnus. I've already, I think, reviewed this twice. I've done live streams with this twice. This is, I think, my third bottle of this. There are whiskeys in which that are really, really, really good, but I don't buy another bottle because there's more to explore. You can't have everything. But there are some whiskeys that are so good, I will go through them more than once, such as Ardbeg 10. I'll probably go through one a year. And then there's some whiskeys I'm like, you know what? This is a whiskey I'm going to keep on my shelf. This is my third of the Joe Magnus. So let me share my notes real quick for those people who aren't familiar with this particular bottle. If I can find, what happened to it? Oh, there we go. Hold on. There we go. All righty, so it's a straight bourbon finished in sherry and cognac cask. So two different types of sherry, Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez. The spirit is sourced from NGP, bottled at 50% ABV or 100 proof, non-aged mint, and of course, price is always going to vary anywhere between $85 and $100. I picked mine up here in California, I think for about $90. And how much were they going for again in your neighborhood?
Like 85 plus tax, I think.
Okay, so pretty close. And you're in Ohio.
Yeah, we get the good old state controlled pricing. So everything's MSRP if you can find it.
Okay,
find so yeah, right.
So you got yourself poured some?
Yeah, so this is the bottle that you graciously provided. This one is a batch, oh goodness, 120, and then I have a sample of batch 77 over here just in case, I can compare these.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'd be curious if there's any.
So most people know my background, 20 years in wine while studying for the WSET Wine Spirit Education Trust Diploma. I had to study a section on spirits, and that's when I kind of got the whiskey bug. And next thing you know, boom, I was just going, head over heels into whiskey. So how did you get into whiskey?
Yeah, I mean, so at first I was a craft beer drinker. So like I was heavy into imperial stouts, barrel aged stouts, some sours, IPAs, that kind of thing. And so I was doing that for a year or two. And as I would tour around, I would typically stay in a hotel and I'd play my shows. But oftentimes when I would go to universities, I would stay with other professors. It saves them hotel money. They could put more money in my pocket for my performance. But when I would stay with them, a lot of people were pulling out scotch, trying to say, hey, let's have a drink together. And at the time I was like, man, this sucks. I hated scotch. I couldn't get into it. The profile of bourbon was more approachable, but I didn't know anything about it. So, I mean, after a while, I was sampling it with different people. I found myself in a hotel room at a gig this one time with a bottle of Lafroig 10 and a couple of buddies. And by the end of the night, we had killed the entire bottle between us. And that was my gateway into Scotch. So that
A
would have been
Lafroig 10.
a Lafroig 10.
Usually that's like the one you have to give people a lot of like warnings and caveats and ease them into it. And then they're like,
I know.
"Ew," and then they have to eventually they kind of accrue, a liking for it. But man, you just went right into it.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I tend to do that with different foods too. Like I have to just jump in the deep end when it comes to new experiences. So that was a couple of years ago, and I just caught the bug, and I bought a couple of bottles out like a Glenmorangie Quinta Ruben. I bought my own Lafroig 10 and maybe one other bottle, maybe a Glenfiddich 15. And I started exploring, and within a couple of weeks, I had 10, 20 bottles, and it just kind of went downhill from there. But I was watching a lot of Ralphie. I was watching a lot of Scotch test dummies, and I was really invested in the Scotch thing for quite a while. And I just kind of trained my own palate through those guys. So I didn't really, no formal training and no wine experience either. So,
So what are you getting on the nose on the whiskey here? Now you have more of a neck pour, whereas mine's been open for a little while. What are you getting?
yeah. Yeah, right away I get like there's a nice damp, musty quality to this overall, at least on mine. I get a little bit of like that dry sherry influence. Could be some raisin, but there's a good amount of spice still in this whiskey, and it's got to be the MGP profile, I would assume, the high rye. I don't know, is she using 21 or 36%? I mean, do you know? No
I don't
idea.
know it, but if she's watching, I'd be happy to hear.
Yeah, but yeah, good amount of spice. Some of those dry dark fruit notes in here,
Right.
but it's not distinctly raisin from the sherry. It's not too bitter or anything like that on the bottom end. So
So I find with this one, when you first start off with it, I get more of the sherry cask influence, and it seems less bourbon-like and more Scotch-like in terms of your sherry cask. And then once you pass the shoulders, the bourbon character, for me anyway, starts to say, "Hello, yes, I am a bourbon," and I'm not being masked by everything else. You're sort of the corn notes, sort of grilled corn notes, start showing up. So you get more of the vanillas start showing up, but they'll still have the spice character and the dried black fruit notes, fig, dates, raisins, and that spice character that kind of reminds me a little bit, and a little bit of a slight nuttiness I get, almost like a baklava kind of a character. If you were to, or what's it, biscotti, or like biscotti. If you were to take your bourbon and dip it into biscotti, you might come up with something like this. But this is one I absolutely love. I was down in Texas one time, and I didn't have anything with me, and I just wanted something small just for the weekend. And so I found a 375, got it for $14. $14
wow.
Which is nuts. I killed it over a weekend.
Wow.
But this is not really, so if someone is really, really into Scotch and they're not a big fan of bourbon, this is one that I think, sort of get your toes into something that's a little bit more Scotch-like because of the variances in the cast finishes.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, what I like about this, I spent a good amount of time with it the other night. I had 2, maybe 3 pours like straight in a row, and I just sat with it for a couple of hours to kind of get ready, and it evolved so much over that period of time. I mean, it was pretty remarkable, but what I love about it is that you can tell that the bourbon underneath the finish is quality, and so often I feel like we're seeing these 4, 5, 6-year-old bourbons that get finished, and it's just like trying to shine a turd. You know what I mean? Like, it's only going to be so good.
Yeah, they're putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, exactly.
Essentially. So this is real common in the wine world where someone screws something up. You got it. Yeah, a few thousand gallons of juice. What are you going to do with it? You can either try to sell it off as bulk and let somebody else, sell it, and they get rid of it. Or you could try to cover it up. And typically the way you cover it up is oak. Make a vanilla bomb on it, slap some oak on it, or just bury it in vanilla, and try to cover some flaws. But you can tell with this one, even though it's a finished whiskey, it's not finished in order to cover anything, but enhance everything and just bring more layers of complexity to it, which is One of the reasons I mean, even if I didn't know who was making it, I would know right off whoever is doing this, blending this, they really know their shit. They're doing a really, really good job with this.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like too with cognac cask finishing, you really run the risk of over sweetening the whiskey, and it's so kept in check here. Through and through. It's so funny when you can smell something one time and be like, check that is absolutely a great product. Or when you start thinking about quality of casks, when you're talking about Scotch or different things, and you can start to evaluate it very quickly. I don't know. It's a really interesting thing, and some people think you're crazy when you kind of call those things out, but it becomes more obvious, I think.
So I know there are some people out there who are more of a bourbon purist, and they stick their nose up at finished bourbons, not in terms of that it can't be a quality spirit, but in terms of, hey, we want to maintain some integrity and identity to bourbon. We don't want things drifting off. And of course, that's a never-ending debate and discussion. And I sort of kind of understand that. But for me, because I'm more of a Scotch drinker, and this scratches an itch that I'm really in the mood for something that has these particular characteristics, that this is a bottle that's going to be really easy for me to grab. And if you can get it for under $100, that's another bonus. We'll get in a couple of these other whiskeys where you're approaching 200 plus. Those are special time whiskeys. But for me, and I don't know what everybody else's budget is, but for something that's under $100 and is of this quality, it's easy to grab without guilt and pour some and at 50% ABV. It's just an absolutely killer whiskey.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of people on the bourbon side of things, well, there's a couple things in there. You talked about finishing first. Yeah, I just feel like the more the merrier with anything in the world, and then let it sort itself out later, in terms of the market. The market's going to tell you if we want more or less of this. But for instance, when the Chateau de la Baude collaboration from Bardstown came out, that is one of the all-time great whiskeys, in my opinion. I mean, that I've ever had. And even the apple brandy finish they did, using Copper and King's apple brandy, which is not a particularly good brandy, to be honest, and it still produced an incredible whiskey. I say the more the merrier. And coming from Scotchland too, your budget is similar to mine, where I don't mind paying $100 for a great bourbon, and a bourbon drinker freaks out when they see something over $45. And
Right. So it's funny because right now, people try to send me samples, and I totally appreciate people sending me samples, but I don't have the time for them. And I mean, because they're just going to end up in I have boxes over here. People send me samples, and I appreciate it, but I only going to review full bottles, and they would be bottles I would probably take with me in my suitcase when I'm traveling. That's when I'm going to drink those. So they're expecting a review. I'm just not going to be able to do a review of it. And even sending me full bottles, it's going to arrive in a couple of weeks. I now have bottles on the floor down here because it's getting a little crowded. But I have a 6 foot by 3 foot bookcase. It'll be off screen. It'll be sitting right here. I'm waiting for it and it'll be quickly filled up. Yeah. But I'm sort of having to figure out how I'm going to get rid of some whiskeys that I'm probably never going to go back to and drink again, so I can put more different whiskeys in there that I know I want to go back to again. If I were to start over again, I would just focus on the whiskeys that I want to, in regions I want to study, and not whiskeys that I'm trying just for shits and giggles.
Yes.
Or because I think it'll get viewers, subscribers, or that kind of nonsense. I would just stay on theme with my channel and just focus on the regions that I was studying. But so how long now have you been doing your channel?
Let's see. I think I actually started the YouTube channel in October. My first video was early November, and then I basically took a month off. I got busy. So I would say for real, I started in December of 2020. So it's been about 4 months, and then I managed to get monetized, which I felt good about. I felt good about the progress up front.
So you hit over 1,000 in 4 months.
Yeah,
that's really, 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 really good. I would say most on average probably take them over a year.
Really?
Yeah. So Bobby and Sam, I Whiskey She Wines, they hit really, really, really quick. But they have a completely different show, and they go. Have you ever watched them?
Yeah, a little bit.
For me, they are Monday night, I'm stressed. I need a laugh. I need to just relax, chill out, and laugh my ass off.
Yes.
Enjoy some whiskey. That's that's my go-to channel for just laughing my ass off. And they're on Monday nights. And there's there's the more serious, geeky guys, and there's the people who are more funny and whatever, and the people with different personalities. But I love tuning in them on Monday. But they also grew really, really, really quick. They took some time off in order to build their own, and it makes me really jealous. They built this really, really cool like little pub, a whiskey bar in their house. What do they call it?
Is it a speakeasy kind
it's
of
like
thing?
a speakeasy thing. It looks really, really, really cool. It looks really, really. They did a killer job on it. So they kind of disappeared for a little while. I was like, oh man, what happened to them? But they come back and just like, wow, that's awesome. So
yeah, I mean,
you think so? I'm looking at your background. I see the symbol up there and I see some other stuff. So if Bill the Whiskey Dick, who I guess he's also live right now, good friend. He was doing his and sort of the living room, and he had to set up his stuff all the time and then take it all down. And he's finally got his own set, and his set is looking really, really, really good. He's got the blue background. He has a logo in the background. So do you think eventually you'll you sort of build something out, or where do you think you're going with your challenge in that respect?
Yeah, that is definitely on the to-do list. I don't know how soon it will be, but what this room was originally, we have kind of a smaller house here in Columbus, but we have a big basement. It's an unfinished basement, but it's my percussion studio. So I have all of my instruments down there, all my recording equipment. I wouldn't want to put this down there necessarily, but I might end up needing to because, this room, I don't really want to build this room out any more than I have. I used to have a podcast, and so this was actually the background of a podcast, and I would sit on this side and a guest would sit over here, and we'd be facing each other and talking. So that's kind of how this all came to be, and I just decided to convert it for this purpose. One of these days, I feel like when we end up moving, it'll be much easier to get a new place because we're planning on moving out of here, and build something out, because right now it's really makeshift.
So I think Bill finally built something in his basement. I think that's where he put his. So Dirty Dog says, Erik, you should drink them with your patrons. It's been on my mind. In addition to editing and recording and everything else, managing all the behind the scenes stuff, I need to do more stuff with my Patreons. It's definitely been on my mind to do some Patreon only stuff. So I've been studying for exams. I got another exam coming up. My last recent video I did on 10 wines every whiskey lover should know. I spent about 40 hours on that video, creating that video. I have another one. It'll post on Sunday. It's called 6 More Wines Every Whiskey Lover Should Know. I probably put 20 to 30 hours into making that video. That'll probably post on Sunday. So I've just been so focused on this stuff, behind the scenes stuff. I need to do more engagement with my patrons and Facebook group and stuff like that. So Dirty Dog is definitely in the works. So you're building a Patreon group yourself?
Yeah, I just started that. I wanted to wait till I was monetized just to kind of feel a little more legitimized by that. But people are really, really great about encouraging me to do it. And I think we have, about 20 people on there now after a week or two. So yeah, it's steadily growing. I'm really trying to do a lot of stuff for like you're saying. It gets hard to manage. I find myself doing one or the other. But we just did our first patron-only stream on Monday, and it's kind of fun to be able to post also about like today I was, playing, like we said, playing Mahler in an orchestra rehearsal, and just snap a quick pic and throw it up there and show a different side of what I'm doing,
Right.
Whether or not people like it, that's to be determined, but we'll see.
Well, I think people start to tune in not just for the whiskey, but they'll tune in for you and liking you as a person and that sort of interaction. And you get your regulars in the chat, the names that you recognize, and then it becomes, and then it starts to cross cultivate, cross hybrid with other channels. If you interact with some whiskey tubers, because they're busy, they got family else, they only do their channel and they don't really interact with other whiskey tubers.
Yeah.
But I like the whole communal aspect. I travel around. I've met up with a lot of whiskey tubers in around the country and over in Scotland and so forth. So I'm a viewer and follower and fan as much as I am Is there like I'm hearing like a sound.
Maybe it's on my end.
Maybe it's a little bit of feedback.
Oh.
So people in the chat, let me know if you can hear feedback. I hear just a very, very slight. I can hear a voice. It might be mine doing feedback.
I've got you coming through my headphones, and then let me check my audio settings. Just make sure.
It's very, very slight.
Okay. Here, I'll throw on cancellation just to be safe. So, okay.
Anyway, so then you start seeing the same people that here. Everybody says the sound is fine. Oh, okay. It's just me. All right, I think we're good. Yeah, now I'm not hearing it. Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Cool. So then you start seeing the same people that are in this chat. You'll see them, with Roy, Aquavite. You see him over at Jason, Mash and Drums, over Bourbon Junkies. See him over at Scotch for Dummies and Scotch Tester and everybody else. And that's really starts to make a better connection around the world. And you start to get to know people. The funny thing is, and I don't know if you experienced it yet, is I know people by a little icon in a chat that rolls up, and then and most people aren't using the real name,
right?
So you don't really have that sort of connection other than they're in the chat, and then one day you meet them, and it's the weirdest feeling because hey Erik, they know me, and they're like, oh, I am the whiskey dude or whatever they call themselves, Oh, hi, how you doing, man? Da, 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 da. So once you start interacting, it's like, holy cow, man! And you start thinking, there's 11,000 people on this planet that are subscribed to my channel. Right. Holy cow. That's it. There, I had 80 people, 100 people, whatever, during the live stream, however, whatever the quantity is. It seems a little funny. But there's a cool aspect to it is you have a better connection with people around the world, and which we can only do due to this technology. And we find and of course, once the COVID crap is over, and maybe you can go to the Bashers Ball or some of the whiskey event or start doing your own meetups in Ohio or something like that. It's just a really, really cool connection with a wider spectrum of the whiskey community. And so I would say it is the number one thing. And as much as I enjoy the whiskeys, that I love about being a whiskey tuber is the interaction with the people. Yeah. Yeah, I'm finding that too, more and more. And people have been so just generous too when you kind of get into this. Meeting up, like Jason immediately was like, hey dude, come over, like let's have some drinks. I mean, Jason's 20 minutes away from me, right. So I was like, holy shit, man, you have like 50K subs, like who am I? What's funny is in the music world, like I've already kind of done a lot of the steps I'm doing in the whiskey world right now. In the music world, I've really climbed the ladder, and so like now I'm usually a full-time touring artist besides COVID, and I play a lot of shows. But in the whiskey world, you start from square one, and it's the same it's the same exact situation where you're just looking for people, you're looking for help from people and community. And you're right, that is absolutely the best part of this whole thing. I mean, I love to nerd out about whiskey, but at the end of the day, I just want to talk shit with Matt Porter and hang out. You know what I mean? Whatever the situation is, it's really cool. So the funny thing, like in terms of choosing a name, Drams and Drums or Drums and Drams? Yeah, Drums and Drams. So I'm gonna screw it up. I'll probably say either. Like Jeremy, Sipper Social Club, and sometimes I say Social Sipper Club. And sometimes people say Strippers Social. Hey, that's a different website, But it was good that you chose a name other than whiskey something. Whiskey this or this whiskey, because, and I know a lot of the whiskey friend and the whiskey novice, good friends, guys over in Ireland, a lot of people, but one of the important things about branding or make yourself differentiate yourself from everybody else is having a unique name. I branded my name Erik Waite. If my name was John Smith, I wouldn't have used my name. It's just, or Jim Jones, or actually Jim Jones was a cult leader, but yeah, a bunch of people died. Down in Guyana. But because the name is spelled differently too, I thought, Erik Waite, hang my hat on that. Get people to know Erik Waite so that whatever I'm doing, if I start a coffee channel, people know the name Erik Waite. But I thought it was really, really good to pick a name. I keep forgetting Drams and Drums. Drums are always first, yeah. Okay, Drums and Drams. Drums is my number one love, so I always think it's first. There you go. Drums and Drams. Of course, the other night someone said you could also do like chicken and mashed potatoes as well.
Yeah, what was it? What were we talking about? Oh, Jason, the mashed potatoes and chicken drumsticks.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
You can do that as well. But I think it's good to choose a name it has a different sound. However, did you think about, well, there's already the mash and drum. In terms of a name, am I sort of
absolutely.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No. So this is funny. Like it came up more and more as the channel took off a little bit, and I started to get these comments on my videos of people just, you know how people can be trolls online and the whole bit, and like started getting these comments. But here's kind of the story. The quick and dirty version is that I was always into Scotch, and you know, with Scotch whiskey, you typically call these drams, right? More so than you would bourbon. Bourbon drinkers are not typically going to say the word dram. It doesn't feel the same. At least I feel that way. Right. So I on the music side of things, I was starting this thing called Project Percussion. It was an idea I had in my head. I love alliterations. So Drums and Drams, before I swear on my life, before I ever saw Jason's channel, I had this idea for Drums and Drams as a Scotch only channel. And then I found bourbon. I found his channel, Matt Porter, Bourbon Junkies, and It's Bourbon Night. And I started watching them, and I was like, oh, shit, there's the mash and drum. This is not great. And then I found out that he lives 20 minutes away from me, and I'm like, this sucks. But here's the thing, and I've talked to Jason about it, too, because I was like, hey, is this okay? You know, Jason is a drummer, and he doesn't do it professionally. And it is like my 100% career, you know, is to be a percussionist or whatever, but I'm not going to call it mallets. I could call it mallets and mash. That would be even worse, right?
Yeah,
but
that would work.
But like, yeah, Drums and Drams, it just had a ring to it. And I said, I'm going to go for it. And I didn't want to use my name, Cameron Leach, because I use that for all the music stuff. Right. And it would get really mixed up, I feel like.
Well, people might start thinking, oh, it's the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
I am neither of those things.
Well, his last name was Leach, but I can't remember what his first name was. He had a British accent, and it was Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I don't know if you ever seen that old show.
No, I don't think so.
Oh yeah, it was called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and basically it was kind of like before My Crib. It was before that show.
Oh,
they showed the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous.
That's cool.
Was it Brian Leach? It might have been Brian Leach. I can't remember what the guy's first name was. So, Robin Leach. That's right. Dirty Dog. Right. Robin Leach. That's right. Right. It was Robin Leach. That's it. So I'm going to move on to my next. I've already killed that one. You still working on the first one, Maggots?
So I just I was putting it on the nose next to that other batch, and it's kind of funny actually how different they are. The sample that I have here of a much earlier batch 77. Mine's 120. It's super cognac heavy.
Okay.
I mean, total sweet bomb here, and the one that I just opened is much drier, much more my style actually. This new bottle. So I don't know if this is the batch, the time that this has been opened or whatever.
Right, or a combination thereof.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to move on to the second one. I'm going to share my notes real quick on the second one. This is, make sure I click on the right. Nope, wrong one. There we go. All right. So this is the Murray Hill Club, a blended bourbon made from whiskeys ranging in age from 9 to 18 years, 51%, so just a wee bit higher, or 102 proof, and similar price range, although this can get in the upper tier price range up to $120. And I got a neighbor, sounds like they're banging on their fence. So hopefully guys aren't picking up on that noise.
No, I can't hear it.
Okay, good. And then sometimes I get dogs barking and whatever else. So yeah, so there is, in terms of name similarities, Scotch Test Dummies and Scotch for Dummies, similar story. They weren't, but they're actually playing off two different things. Scotch Test Dummies, there used to be those public service announcements about wearing seatbelts, and they had this in the Test Dummies, and they'd get wrecked or whatever. I don't think those commercials come out anymore. And so that's where Scott and Bart got their gig from. And Scotch for Dummies was also off of the manuals. They're doing a play on words. The manuals, Macintosh 10 for dummies or whatever the dummies books were. But also there's 4 of them and their whiskey journey. So they started off as dummies, not knowing much. And then since then, of course, just like Scott and Bart, they've grown a lot. So there's some of the parallels in terms of Scotch Test Dummies, Scotch for Dummies. Nothing in terms of like borrowing from each other. Just coincidentally, two different channels using the term.
Yeah.
in dummies and so forth. So anyway, so yeah, so I'm glad. I mean, I mean, 2 channels with a drum theme. How many thousands of? Oh, well, not thousands. That's the hyperbolic. How many channels are you all using the word whiskey? Whiskey this, whiskey that, this, whiskey that. There's a lot more similarities between those channels and your 2 channels.
That's what always cracks me up when people say something about it. I'm like, you realize that the only similarity between me and Jason is one word. I mean, like that's 100% the truth. And yeah, you get the bourbon this, bourbon that.
Right.
Some part of me does wish I would have that in the name because it's easier recognition for someone who doesn't know what a dram is,
right?
Right off the bat. But at the end of the day, I like it. It's got a ring to it, and it kind of is what it is at this point.
Yeah, you got to do something to do a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, who now talk a little bit more about drumming. So, who, in terms of like favorite drummers and influences, to get back a little bit, who are sort of your background, your drummers?
Man, so I started off. Let me think about this. I started off listening to punk music, which kind of got me into metal, right? So, punk, when I say punk, like really loose on that, right? And I quickly went into metal. Like when I was in middle school, I was listening to like Avenged Sevenfold, The Rev. Like this guy was the drummer for Avenged Sevenfold. But I quickly got into like really heavy death metal type stuff. Now, after that, I was playing blast beats and double bass and the whole thing. But after that, I kind of calmed down and got less angsty. And, Gavin Harrison, Carter Beauford, some of these guys. I'm trying to think. Obviously, Sput Seawright from Snarky Puppy.
I never heard of that band. I have no idea who that is.
Really?
Snarky Puppy?
You never heard of Snarky Puppy?
Is that a punk band?
So it's a giant, almost like a big band in a way. It's like fusion jazz type stuff. It's they're some of the most incredible musicians on the planet. Okay. It's really like if you go check out some of their stuff, you'll be like, holy crap. It's really, really good. But Sput Seawright is their drummer. Jojo Mayer, obviously Dave Weckl. I watched a lot of Dave Weckl growing up. I
was into the metal bands in the 80s. I'm just a little older than you are. So heavy metal started 79 going into 80. So I was in the Beatles, then into Rush, and then got into Maiden, Priest, Motorhead. Metallica was a local garage band when I was in high school. There was a bootleg tape going around.
Yeah.
Ron James Dio, Black Sabbath. I mean, the whole gamut. Scorpions. Through all the 1980s, and then I started mellowing out. I would say as I got into my 20s. Eventually got into. Actually started with classical guitar, like Christopher Parkening. Classical. Then I really like Mozart and Vivaldi and Bach. And then one day, flipping the channel, got it. Found Andrea Bocelli, and then got into opera. But in my house, so I grew up with 4 brothers, and we have very, 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 very distinctive music taste, food taste, academic differences. We're all sort of nerdy in books and stuff.
Yeah.
But even though I didn't maybe like whatever they were listening to, at least got exposed to it. So that later on, I would go back to it, and it would be something I grew up hearing. So say this, like the late 60s, 70s, hard rock bands my oldest brother would have been into, whether say Led Zeppelin or whatever, Robin Trower, that background. And then Johnny Cash is definitely got that from my dad. I feel like Johnny Cash was one of my uncles growing up. Someone who was around all the time. He sort of grew up hearing all the time. And then, but I was the only one into heavy metal in my family. But eventually, as I got into my 20s, and then started being so narrow on my musical taste and allowing whatever mood I was in to sort of drive where I was at in music, and that sort of carried over into wines and then whiskeys, and just become very, very eclectic and everything and art. I'm in terms of painters, I'm a big Rembrandt fan, big fan. I have a painting of, obviously not a real one, up in my office. I can't afford a real one, but just became, and being able to be eclectic in all things I think it gives me a broad appreciation for whiskeys, because if I can like variances of music, listening to, Motorhead 1 second and listening to, yes, Kenny G, a minute later, yes, Celine Dion, after
Yes.
that, whatever. Most people are going, no, no. I can also be enjoying a bourbon 1 second. I can be drinking Japanese and Irish, a rye or anything like that, just depending on how I'm feeling in the mood and the weather and stuff like that. Or the wintertime, get into peated scotches and so forth. So I think it really helps to be eclectic in all your tastes. I know I watch a lot of the Whiskey Vault, and Daniel, just in the recent video, saying he doesn't like this food, he doesn't like that food, he doesn't like this, he doesn't like apple juice, he doesn't like this and 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 this in terms of foods and stuff. But I find just be able to acquire tastes in different foods and music. I'm not in, probably rap is probably the only thing and punk. I don't think I have a lot of exposure with punk. And for me, punk was like the Dead Kennedys.
Right.
I mean, that's old school punk that I heard when I was in high school and friends listened to. Or Black Flag, when I think of punk, that's what I think of in terms of punk.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying with this sort of the eclecticism of life. I mean, I think it's so great to be able to be that open-minded. And it's what's interesting about what you're talking about, appreciation and open-mindedness, is that it's actually really hard to kind of separate objectivity from subjectivity. And you know what I mean? Like they end up that line is so blurry. And so with music, it's like, it's really hard to say this is bad. I mean, even, like Steve Reich, if you've ever listened to any minimalist music that's just repetitive over and over, it's like minimalist painting. I mean, it's just everybody, it needs to keep more of an open mind. I don't really have a point to what I'm saying here, I guess, but I think like that concept of eclecticism is, at least in my field, becoming more and more popular. Like when I play concerts, nobody wants to hear me play marimba for 90 minutes on stage, like 90 minutes of marimba solos. I'll play a marimba solo. I'll play a piece, snare drum and electronics. I'll play a gigantic multi-percussion setup. I'll do theatrical pieces where I'm dancing and slapping my face and doing all sorts of stuff. That's kind of the thing to do. And I think that kind of open-mindedness can carry through to a lot of different aspects of life. So not to wax poetic here, but
the thing is, like the guitarists I really, really like, whether you Steve Vai, Yngwie Malmsteen, Joe Satriani, that when you can, other than their albums, you can, when they're playing something else or just playing around or playing with other people, you find they're not narrow in their tastes in music and styles. And of course, with Yngwie, you can definitely hear a lot of classical influence in his music. And in the thank you section on his albums, he thanks a lot of your classic composers. So you can hear that. And I remember Randy Rhoads, before he died in a plane crash, I think it was in '84. Yeah, he was the original guitarist for Ozzy Osbourne. He did a song named after his mother, an instrumental, and it slips from my name at the minute. But you could hear he was studying classical music at the time, and it was affecting and how he would play his guitar. So yeah, I think as much as you can be open-minded and don't pre-program your mind as to I don't like this, and put yourself in these little categories. And that's why for my channel, I can consider it an academic channel, but a generalist in wanting to understand and appreciate all styles and forms of whiskey. So you start off with Scotch. So how long did it take you to sort of start getting into bourbons?
Probably about a year, I would say. Like because with Scotch, I really wanted to explore all the, I mean, you can't say all the different flavor profiles, but like sort of the main categories of what is going on there, not just regionally. I mean, region doesn't really mean that much when you kind of get down into it with different finishes and, peated stuff coming from Speyside or whatever the case may be. But, yeah, I would say it was about a year when I felt comfortable enough with Scotch to say like, okay, I have a general understanding of what's going on here. Now let me move to something else while I continue deepening that understanding with Scotch, and unfortunately I did sell out a little bit because I thought, well, let me stick to the bourbon thing right now because the community is so focused on bourbon. on Whiskey Tube that this will be a great springboard. But I am definitely going to start dialing it more to Scotch because there's just so much great Scotch out there. And I'm so sick of the narrative that all these bourbon whiskey tubers say, Scotch. It's like, no, I could make you like Scotch if you give me 3 pours or 5 pours and set you up a flight. I could make you like Scotch,
The one caveat is if you're really enjoying bourbon and you're getting what you like for under $50.
Yeah.
And and then you get a taste for Scotch. It's like, oh crap. Now ching 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 ching, you're spending your it does get more expensive. And I do not believe if the tariffs go away, they're going to start reducing the prices.
No.
Once they got your money, you never give it back.
Yeah.
It's one of the Ferengi rules of acquisition. Once you got the money, you never give it back. You never see like bridge toll prices start to go down. That just doesn't happen. As long as they got it, they're gonna keep it coming. In fact, I now see the Ardbeg Wee Beastie being sold at the price of Ardbeg 10, and the Ardbeg 10 has jumped up $10 to $15. So everything has sort of gone up in that price range. But yeah, I think if you could at least build a general profile of Scotch's good representatives from different regions, So I did that like several months series on Highland peated Scotch whiskeys, and I reviewed 10 whiskeys from the Highlands and Speyside that were peated, and which showed me one, there's a lot more peated whiskey in the Highlands than I was aware of, and it's not always easy to distinguish them from Islay. One, just because of they may not have as much oceanic influence, and two, a lot of times they're sourcing their barley from Port Ellen out of Islay. So they're still getting that oceanic influence. And then not all peated whiskey on Islay has that oceanic character to it. I think Bruichladdich actually sources some Highland peat for some of their peated stuff. I think the Octomores are actually getting peat from the Highlands, which sounds screwy to me. In terms of where you're going to get sourced from. But anyway, so there's affordability, ability versus availability, and then just terms of what you tend to gravitate towards. But for me, I find bourbon, and this is a stereotype of bourbon, is the bandwidth is not as wide in terms of the flavor profile.
100%.
But ding, 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 ding. I mean, here's some 3 killers that I will always have on my shelf that are actually spectacular. That if any Scotch said, "Oh, bourbons, once you've had one, you've had them all," I'd say, "Here you go. You got to try these 3."
Yeah, absolutely, man. I got a couple questions for you if you don't mind.
Sure. So are you on the Murray Hill yet, or are you still on the first Joe Magnus?
I got the Murray Hill going right now.
Okay, cool. So what do you get on the nose on this one, and then you can ask me your questions.
This one's interesting. I mean, it on the nose, it shows a lot of age for me. I feel like I'm getting like a little furniture polish note, a nice like rich cherry note, some pretty distinct oak. Actually, the cherry's coming through a lot more now. Yeah, really, really rich caramel cherry bomb on this one, but it almost has so when I talk about older Barton products, some of the younger Barton stuff really has that banana note going on. And I tend to find that when you age that 13, 14, 15 years, the banana turns into a furniture polish type note. For me, it because you get so much oak in there with just the age, but then the banana disappears, but there's a hint of that, like banana is sort of a brighter note. Right. There's still a brightness to it, but it reminds me more of like Pledge furniture, furniture polish or whatever.
That's a negative thing. A lot of people are going, "What? Oh, no way."
I know, but like the Sam Houston 14, it's almost like you're thinking of an old chair that you're polishing because of the oaky wooden qualities, right. And then also this brighter note that's on there. It just sticks with me, and I can't get over that. And the Murray Hill's got a little bit of that, but the rich cherry notes in here are great. I'm gonna have to taste it to get more. But
so the funny thing is, so I mentioned this off screen. Some people already know. So I have temporaries currently, and I'm waiting to get a crown put in. So I've not been doing technical whiskey reviews because aromas and flavors I'm fine, but anything sharply acidic, like I had a bottle of Chianti Classico last weekend, and the acidity is real high, and it's just like, and real high alcohol also is like, right now just a bit, you can really feel it.
Yeah.
But the texture, even on this, even with the teeth the way they are at the moment, it's silky. It's, I know, God forbid, smooth. There is a refinement to the texture profile. I pay a lot of attention to development. Well, attention to development and texture in my reviews, in addition to all the aromas and flavors, as to how it starts from the front to the middle and to the finish. And while I could not do a review of this on that note, because the front part, but in the mid palate and into the finish, it just glides. It just glides, and I love, and it has a lengthy finish. So I'm fine on my mid palate, and then my finish is just on entry that I don't trust my valuation skills. But on the mid palate and into the finish, I absolutely love this bourbon, and I think it does have a real nice development. It's not a one chord song, you know.
No,
it's really, really, really nice.
Yeah, one thing I love that you're talking about too, which I just don't know enough about, and I think you, obviously, with all of your wine experience, you would know so much more about the ideas of texture and structure and things like this. And it's something that just doesn't get talked about in the whiskey community. And it's something that I think what taught me more, like in particular about texture of a whiskey, was not only George Dickel stuff when we talk about the minerality that also affects the texture, but also drinking. I had a sip with a friend of mine. He has an independent bottling of a Bruichladdich 15-year. And it's exceptionally like granite mineral, a bit sulfured, unfortunately. But the texture of that whiskey was so, I don't know, so granular and mineral, I guess. It really helped me kind of start to distinguish that in whiskey, which is something I never thought about before, because being self-taught from a lot of whiskey channels, nobody really speaks on that. And
Right.
the wine world has so much more of a holistic approach, I feel like, to just the liquid overall, I suppose.
So, and that sort of parallels in terms of, so my first year, my old videos from the early years are gone. I deleted them. One, because they make me cringe. Two, I could tell my valuations were off because I was coming from a mindset of wine. So even though I'd been trained with the W set, on spirits, the mentality and approach to it is very different with wine than it is with spirits in terms of how you evaluate and understand structure. But I find also, you know, there are things that are ways of playing a guitar that are more classical, that are typical classical, but also drummers. Sometimes you'll hear someone talk about a rock drummer, and someone will say, yeah, he's playing in a rock band, but he's sort of a jazz drummer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So what would you say is something that's more of a typical of the way a jazz drummer might do something, but then do it with a rock band, do you think?
So you're saying what is an example of that, I guess?
Right. Or yeah, maybe I'm throwing you something that you have to think
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, but just the idea of hearing stylistic elements out of their traditional context is kind of what you're talking about. I mean, that's really, I think, okay, let me approach it from this point of view. A lot of things that make it to the radio that are not just straight EDM, bumping, whatever kind of music, a lot of that stuff, when maybe 5 to 8 years ago, we started to hear almost this folky thing resurge on the radio. It's because oftentimes they were taking folk and putting it into a pop context, or it's some other thing like this. And so when I think about music, I think a lot about that, which is like stylistic. You could call it appropriation, but I don't think that's the right word. I think it's just generous borrowing or whatever.
Right.
But yeah. So you're kind of talking about that in terms of approaching whiskey, I guess, from a wine point of view.
Well, so say like, I mean, so you let's take Neil. I mean, I don't know drummers the way Nancy does or the way Jason does, but you know, you look at the way Neil Peart played versus a lot of other typical drummers, and then you look at Buddy Rich or some other drummers, is you know, he brought something else from something outside of a narrow perspective of rock and roll into, and even stylistic, the way they wrote songs, the way they structured the songs, these really long storytelling songs. But also the 1970s kind of had a more of the long guitar, intricate guitar solos that wasn't real radio friendly because it didn't fit into a 3-minute format in terms of a song, but they didn't care. They were a band that grew by word of mouth, not by advertising or popularity on the radio. So they wouldn't fit. And Queen had some elements of that as well, particularly like Bohemian Rhapsody. But I'm thinking in terms of thinking outside of the box and then bring it into drumming or whiskey. I mean, Nancy brought an Armagnac cognac style of blending in that training, and they brought it into the whiskey world and just, rocked the whiskey world, and then just having influence on the whiskey world, and other people were sort of taking a cue from that and then taking an approach to it from her.
Yeah.
As well.
I mean, that's kind of how things evolve. It feels like too. I'm in obviously with whiskey now, like the Armagnac Armagnac finished whiskey is now the talk of the town. It is the most expensive shit on the secondary market, all of that kind of stuff. And a lot of that can be traced back to Nancy, I feel like, in terms of really popularizing it with the Magnus and a regular release. But yeah, that's how we see progress, I feel like,
right.
And in the same way too, back in the 1920s, 30s, before the drum set was really the drum set, we were, people were playing on Chinese toms imported from China. That was the original tom.
Oh, okay.
Chinese toms, right? And they would use temple blocks and different, they used to be called dragon's mouths, also from China. So all of these Chinese influences came in, and then we sort of adapted it and turned it into the drum set as we know it today. And a lot of that happened in New Orleans. But that was like one of the biggest progress points of music today. We wouldn't have the drum set, which is crazy.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were going to ask me a question earlier, if you still remember it. What was the question you were going to ask me?
What I was going to ask you, actually, we kind of got there a little bit, which was in terms of language, jargon, lingo, however you want to call it. When you approach whiskey, do you find yourself, I think of it as like Spanish to English and then having Spanglish. Do you think that you kind of flip a switch and go away from wine verbiage to whiskey, or do you sort of speak Spanglish between the two?
So that's a really good description, because the main thing that I had to kind of leave behind is the structural analysis, because so in wine it's sugar, acid, tannin, body. So the ripeness and the sugar level that then affects that, which is a reflection of climate, which then gives you the amount of alcohol within, is a reflection of a sense of place, which then affects body from alcohol, then affects mouthfeel and weight, as well as your typical heat. Tannin affects, giving it sort of a backbone and structure, and maybe perhaps a little bit of grippiness there as well. And then of course development. So in analyzing spirits, you're not talking about acidity, but there can be a little bit of wood tannins, but it's not a major player, although it can be. Hey, Bill, how you doing, man? So sorry about that. You said, I didn't know you were going late tonight. You should see some folks popping over in the next few minutes. No worries, Bill. I'm normally going live at 5, so I just went a little bit later this evening in order to get our schedules to match up. But no worries, bro. Thanks a lot. So it's mostly in terms of how I begin the analysis that had to change, because the first thing so when you're evaluating blind and you're taking an exam, you stick to a grid: sugar, acid, tannin, alcohol, body, length of finish. Boom, 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 boom. Fruit, flower, spice, earth. It's boom, 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 boom. So even if you get spice first on a wine, because I'm sticking to a grid, I might make a mental note of it, but I won't mention it until I cover the fruit, flowers, spice, and then earth. And earth, even if earth is more prominent, because I'm sticking to this format, it's the last thing I'm gonna mention. And you stick to the format so that you don't miss anything. You don't forget to mention something, because it's not about getting the wine right, although it is that. It's about showing your math. How did you get there? How did you come to the conclusion that it's these grape or grapes from this region, from this vintage, and potential producer? You have to show it. So you could get it right at the end, but if you didn't show your math, you're not going to pass.
Wow.
Yes or yes. So it's sticking to that grid and being used to being in a grid
Mm-hmm.
That then when you go over to spirits, whether you're talking cognac or anything else, or whiskey or bourbon else, I realized, okay, I got to let go of the grid and modify it. And so I've actually written several times a grid for whiskey. And on my Facebook group,
Mm-hmm.
or someone's a member of my Facebook group, they can actually go into the file section, and I developed one for evaluating whiskeys. And it's changed a little here and there. And I've sent it to like Daniel, and I've sent it to Roy, I've sent it to some other people, and it'll probably continue to morph in terms of a structured analysis of whiskeys. But that's been sort of the main thing is the mental focus, not approaching, and then developing a new grid for how. Now, the WSET, Wine Spirit Educational Trust, they have a grid on how they want you to approach spirits. I don't like it. The WSET, there's some pros and cons. There's a pros and cons to everything and everybody, and to the organization. I learned a lot from them. It was a great experience, but I wasn't. I learned from master sommeliers. I learned from masters of wine, and masters of wine will tell you, learn how to taste from a master sommelier. One of them was an acquaintance friend of mine named Doug Frost. He's one of 4 master sommeliers who's also a master of wine. There's only 4 in the world, and he'll tell you straight up. He tells people who are studying to become master of wine, learn how to evaluate wines from master sommeliers. That's what you want to learn from, and then bring that skills over into WSET or bring it over into the masters of wine. And so, I'm starting to ramble because I'm an old man.
You're good.
So learning how to get out of the grid and the shackles of and how to adapt to how I was going to do things in the whiskey world. And the thing is, whiskey is constantly about adapting. So you can't do in Texas, you do in single malts, you can't do it the way they do in Scotland.
Right.
Different climate, different everything. Your barrel management, your cask management is going to be radically different than it is over there. You have a problem with age maturing too quickly some components of your spirit, while other parts are not maturing as fast. So learning wine and whiskey is about constantly adapting, learning how to, in production, let's learn how to adapt and how to have a plan B. So because I had this dental work done, I could have said, oh, well, I can't evaluate whiskey, so I'm taking several weeks off until it comes back. No. Plan B is come up with some other kind of content that doesn't require evaluation, play to my strengths. You always play to your strengths. Work on your weaknesses, but play to your strengths. Strengths are wine, so do some things wine, whiskey related that go heavier academic that without having to do any evaluation, and do some videos and content like that, and keep going forward on that. And then when I get my crowns, then I can go back to doing evaluating. So adapting and changing, whether you're talking about a climate or a region or a type of whiskey, or whether you're changing in terms of evaluating wines, switching over and adapting, changing whiskeys, to changing and adapting to a style and approach to doing cognac and armagnac, to adapting and changing to how you're going to blend those things that work, bring them over. It's the same thing with, different ways of what they say in the guitar and how you can do guitar and chords and licks and transitions and whatever else, or vocals. There are some heavy metalists that at times they almost have an operatic quality to them. Rob Halford. Particularly some of the oldest stuff. There's almost an operatic quality to some of that. It just, he was an amazing, still is, an amazing vocalist. So you can bring that sort of styles and techniques over. Daughtry. I'm trying to remember what his first name is.
Chris Daughtry.
Yeah, Chris Daughtry.
Yeah.
So he learned a little bit from Andrea Bocelli about breathing technique for his vocals. So I know I'm sort of rambling and going on and on, but to answer your question, yeah, there is sort of a hybrid approach to both of them. And there's some strengths and skills that are brought over, but also you have to be mindful of it's different. You have those things that don't work and don't carry over. You just don't carry them over.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. It's I really think of it as from an educational lens, educational psychology and all that kind of stuff, where you're really thinking about like how to communicate, to the audience or to the student or whoever it is. Like, and you have to differentiate your instruction no matter what situation you're in. And I feel like, yeah, trying to bring wine language to bourbon, bringing 25% of it would be actually really helpful, because it's going to teach some bourbon people to go deeper and take a different approach. But if you go 75%, you're going to alienate a lot of people, because they don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
But and do you think that it will, because bourbon is so, and whiskey in general is so different than wine in a lot of ways. And I've thought about the evaluation of the two and how some things just cannot be the same. Do you think there could be a standard evaluation, like you're talking about, a sort of chart layout? Like you said, you've been working on one. Do you think there will ever be a standardized thing from an organization that comes down and says, this is our approach?
Well, the funny thing is, so you have the Wine Spirit Educational Trust, you have the Institute of Masters of Wine, you have the Court of Master Sommeliers. Mm-hmm. We're talking wine. Even they aren't 100% exact in their evaluations. Mm-hmm. So just as there's not, an exact cut and paste from one to the next for wines, you're definitely not going to expect it for whiskeys. I don't think whiskeys examinations will ever have the heavy emphasis on location as much as wine. But I think, but I think you do need to know what's your base grape. What is it? Is it Cabernet? Is Bordeaux? Is it Cab base? Is it Merlot base? Is it, what's their base ingredient? Like same thing with grains. What's your base ingredient? Is this mostly corn? Is it mostly malt? Is it mostly rye? Can you pick up both corn and rye notes? And then how is it produced? Can you tell the difference between something that came out of a pot still versus a column still? Texturally? Can you tell the difference between a blended Scotch and a single malt? That picking up on that malty characteristics. Can you tell the difference between casks? Really talking about casks, between a bourbon cask and a sherry cask or some other wine casks? Can you tell those? I think that's a bigger thing. And the challenge is always going to be, for me, because I did some blind tasting videos recently, lives, the Japanese and Scotch were so close. They were the really, really, really difficult ones. But if Japanese, and I'm praying they do, if Japanese get their shit together and have something equivalent to some of the Scotch Whisky Association, I wonder what the Japanese word is for shit. Anyway, get their stuff together so that they get rid of fake Japanese whiskeys and really focus and have their own style and their approach of philosophy and approach to whiskey and the delicate finesse and elegant aspects that the best Japanese whiskeys are known for, so that it reflects a Japanese approach to it. Then it'll be those minor details in which you go, this has that Japanese character to it versus this has that more Scotch character to it. Now, I've been blinded. I was blinded on, actually, the spirit was from Aaron, but it was aged in Texas, and I got blinded on it. And I because of the intensity, the oak character to it, and I could tell heavy extraction from oak, that there's no way you're going to get that from Scotland. And yet the malty spirit character of it reminded me of Scotland. So I said, this makes me think of someone who's trying to do Scotch in a New World way. I was being blind on it. It was Daniel Whittington who was blinding me. And he just goes, here, what do you think of this? And I said, this seems like a Scotch that someone's trying to do here in the United States. But I was actually mentally, partly was thinking, it reminds me of Tasmania, because I've had some thanks to Tom R. I had some Tasmanian. It reminded me a lot of something Tasmanian.
Wow.
But it turns out it was something from Aaron, aged in Texas. But because, I wasn't expecting Texas, and because there was something distinctly Scottish about it, and something distinctly New World in terms of a climate, in terms of the oak impact of it, it's a whiskey that doesn't exist on the market, and yet I was able to identify it. Now, I could get blinded tomorrow on something that's distinctly Scotch or distinctly Texas and blow it out my ass. So I'm glad I got that one right. But I think having that sort of a general approach, again, it's always going to be generalities. And the third, I'm wearing this T-shirt from Somm. There's 3 movies called Somm. There's supposed to be a 4th one coming out. And the third one, Jancis Robinson, who is the master of wine, all our textbooks, the thick textbooks on wine are written by her. Fred Dame, who is the master sommelier of master sommeliers in North America. He brought the Court of Master Sommeliers to the United States. And the third gentleman, he just passed away, Stephen Spurrier. He just passed away. He was the man behind the Judgment of Paris in 1976. In which the Americans beat the French in blind wine tasting contest. He just passed away like at the age of 80, like a couple weeks ago. Anyway, Jancis Robinson mistook a California a Pinot Noir for a Burgundy. But it was made by an acquaintance of mine. And I have a bottle of that very bottle in my cellar. Raj Parr. He is a Burgundy expert, and so he distinctly chose a vineyard and a place to grow Pinot Noir so that he could make a wine that was Burgundy-like.
Wow.
But again, it's an example of you could mistake one reason for another. But in generally speaking, yeah, that's going to happen. Anyway, I think the same thing with whiskeys. I think there are some general profiles to whiskeys that, and they're going to be selective as to what they would choose to put on exam and what's typical and should be expected and what's universally available. In terms of whiskeys and so forth. But that's really sort of my focus is more and more learning the distinctive characteristics of the various regions and eventually towards blind tasting. Not to be a showy thing. Hey, look what I can identify because even master sommeliers can blow it at, and blind tasting. But still to understand and then grow in a great appreciation of the place, of the region, of the culture, the people behind it, the production, and then just enjoy, for me as a nerd and a geek, to enjoy the whiskeys all that more. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's so good to hear you talk about all this stuff. I'm telling you, it's a breath of fresh air, honestly, in the whole whiskey world, whiskey tube world, especially. But yeah, like I mentioned the other night on my live stream, like I bought a bunch of books now. Like I want to start getting into the more academic side of these things because I too am a nerd. So, I don't know where that's going to lead, but I think it can only go in a positive direction to learn more and more about the actual history, production, backstory of all of this. Sure. So,
well, for me, even if so, I know enough chords to play AC/DC is about So, but even with the little experience I have with playing guitar, at least it gives you a great appreciation for those who do it well.
Yeah.
So then, even if you don't do something professionally, if you can get a couple of days working in a winery, a couple of days harvesting grapes, a couple of days working in a distillery, a couple of days doing some blending, learning blending with a master blender. Even if you're not going to do it professionally, it gives you a great appreciation for those who do it so well. And I think the more you learn, whether it's through books or personal experience, visiting a distillery in Kentucky, Texas, Ireland, Scotland, I'd like to get up to Canada one of these days. It just gives you a deeper appreciation of the craftsmanship and everything that goes on behind it. The more you understand it. So reading books, and the funny thing you read about reading books is, wait a minute, this book says this, and this book says this. Particularly like water. The impact of water, how important is the water, and some of the myths and stuff like that. But I think anything you can do, whether it's listening to podcasts, watching videos, whiskey tubers, or reading books, I'll give you great appreciation of it. I go for it. I always read books with a pen in hand. I'm scribbling notes and underlining and stuff like that.
Yeah, man.
So I'm going to move on to the third one. The third one. Are you still working on the Murray Hill Club?
Yeah, I might save the rest of this and pour it back in my sample bottle for another day. I just noticed a little bit of grassiness in it as we were talking, but I don't know if you're picking up on that at all. It was just in the tail end of that last sip that I had, but I could be crazy.
So no, I was thinking 3/4 of the way back, just before you swallow. So entry obviously is entry, mid palate, and then 3/4 for me. What I call 3/4 is just before you swallow.
Okay,
that's from how far back it distant wise is in my mouth. Right. Well, it's moving past my tongue. It's about 2 inches now. Now it's about 3/4 inch. Now it goes down. But just before I swallow, I call that 3/4, and then swallow. And then the follow through is, what am I tasting now as I'm talking right now? I'm smacking the lips, and getting a taste of it. but I could see that it's almost I get more of a hay.
Okay.
Not a green grass, but more of a hay character than a green grass notes I associate with new make. More of a new make character, and I'm not getting a new make character on this one.
The one that had the most freshly cut green grass note to me recently was the Ezra Brooks 99. Like to a weird level that was like, I can't drink this. It's very unpleasant.
Yeah, I have a Sonoma bourbon like that. Yeah, it reminds me, the wood character reminds me of, like I took several years of wood shop in high school. When you take a planer, by planing by hand, go, shh, and you get that peel of wood that comes out of the planer. You get that character to it. And yeah, that's really off-putting. And then and then followed by that is that green character. That's like, no. It needs, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I have an old Ezra, the number 7 of him, but I haven't tried that one you just mentioned.
The Ezra 99 is like a new budget bottle, and people love it. I mean, it's fine for what it is, but and a lot of people said, like, I don't know what you're talking about with this grassy note. And I had one person comment on the video and go, dude, I totally got this. And I got a little dandelion too. I was like, yes, thank you. I felt validated by this one random comment on YouTube, because I was like, I feel like I'm going crazy here, but I'm kind of sensitive to that. I feel like in some of these bourbons. And I read something the other day. I do not remember where it was online about Heaven Hill and Buffalo Trace talking about how some of their casks get this grassy quality to them for some reason. And it's only certain casks. And it didn't have an explanation of why that would be, but they were talking about how they can't use those for certain things. They have to blend it out. I was like, that's interesting.
If I were to, I'm not, what do you call it? I'm not an arborist. So I'm not a tree guy.
Yeah.
But my bet would be it would have to do for that particular tree, where they're getting that cut from and what the rain was for that year and how it affected the grain. This is, could be blowing up my ass. When I know something, when it's just purely hypothetical, I'll tell you, my guess would be it has to do with where the grain is at for that wood for that particular year. And how it is affected by the rainfall for that year and the growth of the tree. That's a guess.
Yeah,
that would be a guess. Or it could also be with, because they don't just freshly cut wood and start making barrels out of it. They season it by maybe that particular wood wasn't left out in the dry air long enough, and so that sort of remnant, that character from the fresh wood, it didn't let that particular wood sit out long enough, and they were a little bit too quick to make a cask out of it. That would be, those would be my two guesses, probably more the second than the first. And that's from doing woodwork, and that sort of understanding of wood from doing woodwork. I worked in a cabinet shop and several years in wood shop, and just the different smells you get off of old wood versus a new wood when you're cutting and so forth. But that would be my guess. That would be my guess off of that one. So, but who knows? I could be talking, just blowing smoke out of my head. So let me share the notes on I'm going to get into the, of course, I have a different bottling than you. This is the Joe Magnus. Bring up my notes on my, the cigar blend. Yeah, there we go. So I have batch 21, bottle 207. This is a blend of 11 and 18-year-old bourbons finished in Armagnac casks. For those who don't know what Armagnac is, it's a spirit. There's cognac and Armagnac. Cognac is northeast of Bordeaux, just slightly northeast of Bordeaux. Armagnac is slightly southeast of Bordeaux, and they have a lot of similar grapes, such as Uni Blanc. They use Baco and so forth, and they're done in a lembic still. This is at 62.15% ABV or 124.3 proof. This one, unreleased, I find they tend to be about 175, and then they disappear really quick. And then those that are still on the shelf can go 250, 300, and up. So when they first get released, first come out, that's when to grab them, in my personal opinion, if you can afford them. But this is a rare occasion whiskey. This was actually my whiskey of the year for last year, out of my top 10 for 2020. This is my whiskey of the year, and that's unusual for me, being mostly a Scotch guy.
Right. Have you tried the Chateau de la Baude, the Bardstown collaboration?
No.
See, I need to send you a sample of that. It's a little more singular than this Magnus. All the batches I've tried have been very the profiles. I don't want to say all over the place, but they're very diverse in what's going on. The Chateau de la Barre is very singular, down the middle with kind of a one note thing. Do you know where she sources these casks from by chance?
That's a good question, Nancy. If you're watching this later on, or if you're in the chat, maybe I'll send her a text or an email later and ask her. That'd be a really, really good question. And I don't know. I don't know who does. I know she's the blender. I don't know in terms of where they're grabbing casks and how she has a role in that, or not, or she's mostly on. They send her spirits and she does the blending. So I don't really know.
Yeah.
So which one do you have, by the way, in terms of bottling and so forth, and batch?
So batch 24, bottle number 300 of 373. So 24, I think it's called the fruit something. I'd have to look. She has the notes on her site. Let's see, and I have a sample of batch 27 that I've tried, which was pretty different actually. So let's see.
Oh man, I think I just jizzed in my pants. Sorry, I shouldn't make you laugh while you got whiskey in your mouth. It'll come out your nose. I
was at 75%, and you made me laugh, man.
yeah, whiskey coming out your nose isn't really good, man. That is. Oh, there's some whiskeys. You can watch television, read a book. You're not focused on the whiskey. You got off the side. You're watching, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel.
Oh, there we go. Ancient astronaut theorists.
Oh yes, definitely. Yes, definitely. I love that. I watched every season of every episode.
I grew up on that. With
really?
my dad. Oh my God! And also, I should say before we're already away from it. My dad has been playing guitar for like 35 years, so I grew up on all the bands that you mentioned.
Oh, okay.
That was my childhood, man. So, anyways,
okay, cool. But there's some whiskeys. You're doing something else. You're hanging out. You're chatting. You're on your computer. I'm editing video or something. The whiskey isn't there for me to focus on. It's just this nice accompaniment. And so, I'll grab a nice, easy, Johnny Walker Black, $30 whiskey with a little bit of peat character in the background. This is a whiskey that says, everybody shut up and pay attention. Forget everything else. Boom, focus on this. This is really a whiskey that I find grabs my attention and it almost makes me shut up. And that's a difficult thing to do. It's just like you just stop and go, whoa, a Zen moment. This is what you do when you drink this whiskey. Hold on. You just zone out, man. You're just like, wow. And you're sort of thinking about it and you're analyzing and you realize all the character and the waves and there's this lightness to it and this delicateness to it. And yet look at the ABV level. This is not a whiskey that's going pow with alcohol, and yet it's there and it delivers an intensity of flavor and yet with a lot of grace. Now I would like to have as many of these as I could get and compare them. I would like to understand the full range of them. So in the future, if I can get samples from someone, just in order to sit down and go side by side and have a better understanding of cigar blends. But at this price level, until I kill this one, I'm probably not going to pick up another one. Oh, maybe I should just pick up another one for do that very thing. And I'll write it off of my taxes as an academic cost or something.
There you go. I am down to the last little bit, man. Oh. I am nursing this thing.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. Well, so mine is called the Fruit Bomb, and yours is something about icing. What is it?
Well, they give like a sub name to it that they don't put on the bottle.
Yeah, yours is called Icing on the Spice Cake is what yours is called.
Oh, that's what they put on the website?
Yeah. Her notes. Have you seen the notes that she writes on the website?
Yeah, but I don't like to have them memorized.
Yeah.
I have to go back and look them up.
They're.
And
I mean,
before I watch any videos, because I'm comparing notes with whiskey tubers, I really want to spend as much time as I can before I read anything else, because I don't want to be prejudiced by someone else's notes. And so I've read through them, but at my age, I'm lucky if I remember to put my underwear on the right side. Yeah. Okay. Tags in the back. Okay, I'm doing good. All right. Doing all right. But this is just an amazing bourbon.
Now, I heard Nancy talk about this, and I've read about it as well. But this idea of rancio, like, are you hip to this? Are you like this is something that I don't understand, and it's like, for me, when you're in the very beginning stages of learning how to taste, let's just say bourbon or Scotch, the idea of oakiness was always a hard one for me, because I didn't have like a point of reference, which when I try to tell people how to develop their palate in some way, points of reference are the most important thing. Compare and contrast to different things. But rancio, like, I don't understand this concept. And I've only had one bottle of Armagnac, this Delort 25, right? So, I don't know. So, and because it is a key characteristic for identifying certain kinds of wines and spirits. I'm holding back a burp right now. The bourbon belches are real.
Yeah, the bourbon belches, man, those are key. And how to identify and how do you just describe that is probably the biggest challenge. I think the biggest things that people have challenges with is, I'm getting this, but I don't know what to tie it into, how to identify that. What is that like? And I would say that's probably, coming from the wine background, that I think has really, really helped, because in order to describe something accurately, and it's not completely subjective. Yeah, preferences are subjective. The guys in the chat knows gonna say this, but there are some objectiveness to wines and whiskeys in terms of characteristics, because, and I've proven this, because if there wasn't an objective character to it, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So I can blind taste you on a whiskey without you tasting it. All I have to do is describe it accurately. I can blind taste you on a wine, and if I describe it accurately, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I used to run the study group for the quartermaster sommeliers, and there was like there's probably about 7,000 people on it. I left the group because there was a lot of bullshit drama going on, and they had like 4 or 5 scandals going on the last couple of years, which I'm not going to get into. Yeah, I mean, Michael Bennett called it. Yeah, it would, Mike. But I used to help people prepare for exams, and the most challenging for exam for most people tends to be on a blind tasting. And I would tell them, call me, and I'll blind taste you over the phone. And they're like, what? So I get them on the phone. I said, okay, so I'm going to blind taste you on the wine. I'm going to start describing it. You tell me what it is I'm tasting. I'll describe it. And they say, well, it sounds like you're talking about a Riesling. Okay. And then I say, okay, and it has these characteristics. Where's the Riesling from? And they'll say, well, it sounds a little bit more from Alsace versus from the Mosel out of Germany. And I go, you're absolutely right. If I couldn't, if there wasn't objective characteristics that was generally recognized as classic characteristics of these wines, I wouldn't be able to do that. Right. Now, the problem is, and I think I did a lot. I don't think the video exists anymore. There's something called phenomenological language, which means you're talking things how things appear, not how things actually are. So if I say the sun's going to come up at 5:30, that doesn't mean I believe in geocentric theory, right? Still today. I could ask Siri. Okay, hold on. Watch. Hey Siri, what time is the sun going to come up tomorrow morning?
Yes, it's going to be sunny tomorrow morning.
No. Hey Siri, you moron. What time is the sun going to come up tomorrow morning?
I won't respond to that.
Okay, Siri, sorry for the insult. Hey Siri, what time is the sun coming up tomorrow morning?
Yes, it should be sunny tomorrow morning.
I'm not going to. Hey Siri, what time is sunrise tomorrow?
Sunrise tomorrow will be at 6:25 a.m.
Okay. I had to ask the question a different way. Okay. Technically, the sun doesn't rise The Earth rotates.
Right.
Right. The sun's not actually moving and coming up and over. That's phenomenological language. Speaking as appearances. Okay. So it's because when people first get into wine, they're like, do they put lemons in there? Are they putting strawberries? No. Are they putting flowers in there? No. We're speaking how things appear and how things seem. The problem is there are some aromas and flavors that are going to be spot on. Sauvignon Blanc, grapefruit, right? A cool climate Chardonnay, yellow apples and pears, Cabernet Sauvignon, blackberries and black currants, California Pinot Noir, strawberry preserves. These are classic characteristics. It's a preserved character that tells you, rather than fresh, unripe or underripe strawberries, that tells you the climate is a warmer climate. So wow. if they didn't have universally recognized characteristics, then you say, well, that's what you get. That's not what I get. So I don't know. But I can say, a cooked corn, vanilla, caramel, vanilla, nutmeg, cinnamon, baking spices, just a hint of an herb characteristic. And you're going to go, okay, am I describing a Scotch? Am I describing a Canadian rye? What am I describing? You're going to go bourbon. Now, you might not jump to the conclusion, oh, that's a Joe Magnus, but you're going to be in the ballpark. So there is an object character to it that is uniform, and that's why you can be tested. If there wasn't something objective about it, you couldn't be tested on it.
Right.
Now, what if something isn't exact? Then you get more. It's kind of you're getting in the neighborhood, and so when you particularly sherry notes mixed with this, and this, people get Christmas cake, panettone roll, which is basically. It's a breaded character with dried fruit notes. Panettone roll if you're Italian, Christmas cake if you're from the UK, but you're describing the same thing. And so if I could say, if I said, give me an underripe red fruit, name an underripe red fruit.
Like a strawberry?
All right. So an underripe strawberry has a little bit more of a tartness to it than a fully ripe strawberry, or you get out of strawberry preserves.
Yeah.
Then there's raspberries, which is a little bit more of a tartness to it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a range of red fruit notes. You're in the general category of red fruits. Now you're breaking it down into, does it seem really, really ripe? Does it seem slightly tart? Does it seem freshly picked? Does it seem baked? Does it seem, and all those other characteristics? And that's where you get more precise. But then when there's something that's like, and herbs and flowers. I mean, most master sommeliers I know don't know the flowers really well. They're not flower experts. So the purple wine, okay, I get violets, but there's a floral character. You're not going to get rose spice or teas or whatever else. So, and then there are things you're going to be more associated, I think, with your personal history and your background. Like Ralphie's always describing things in terms of teas and herbs, things that they drink there that we don't really drink here.
Yeah.
But that gives you cause to say bergamot. Have you ever had bergamot? Bergamot is a citrus, and it's used in Earl Grey tea.
Okay.
So I heard someone use bergamot as a descriptor for a whiskey, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" Google, what is bergamot? And then when it said it was a characteristic, it was used in making Earl Grey tea. Go buy Earl Grey tea, smell and taste. Oh yes, there is a citrus character. Barley sugar. Mike Bennett said barley. He says, Ralphie says barley sugar a lot. I've never smelled or tasted barley sugar, but one of these days. But you go, oh, so now that I've had Earl Grey tea, Earl Grey hot, as Jean-Luc Picard would say, now I know what they're talking about. So that's sort of the joy of exploration. Someone says something, you never had it before. I'm going to go find out what that is and then see if, oh, you know what? Yeah, I totally get that. For me, Malbec. Have you ever had a Malbec?
I have. I couldn't recall it though.
So a Malbec, it's a Bordeaux varietal. Now the home of Malbec in France is Cahors, but it's been made popular and it's doing really well in Argentina. There was these breakfast cereals we had when I was a kid. Count Chocula, Frankenberry, which are
Yep.
strawberry, and Blueberry cereal. Have you ever had any of these?
All of them.
Okay, there you go. I didn't know if they still make them because I don't eat kids' cereals anymore,
Yeah.
But Blueberry cereal on Mel Beck, when I'm blind tasting Mel Beck, I get Blueberry cereal.
Wow.
that funny, it's really like a fake blueberry character to it. And I get that on Mel. For me, that's a flag for identifying. And then, of course, the intensity, which is going to give me, understand the climate and so forth. So a Cahors, France versus Argentina, the climate is going to be the main difference in terms of how the Malbec is going to come across. But anyway, I'm getting off on the wines. But anyway, yeah. So I think, so in terms of descriptors and how you descriptors, you want to communication. And the one thing I've been continue to want to improve is be a good communicator. In terms of verbally, be able to be relatable and body language. One of the reasons I took classes down at the school down in Austin, Texas, I took a marketing class and then I took the regular whiskey class, because it's all about communication. It's how to be a better communicator to not just the whiskey geeks and snobs, people who've been, but for the new people. And if I have a weakness, I think I tend to not be mindful enough of the new people, which is why I did some of the recent stuff that I did, to don't over everybody's head.
Yeah.
Bringing down so that you can reach all audiences, the people who've been around for a while, the newbies, and everybody in between, and continue to work on being a better communicator, and do it in a way that's not dry and boring. It's easy for me to lecture. And today we'll be discussing polynomials and some crazy ass shit. So.
Oh man.
So what in terms of being a whiskey tuber, what's been sort of, you think, some of the learning curves and things you weren't expecting that you think you started discovering as a whiskey tuber?
One of the learning curves for me, I mean, there's stuff like, of course, like time management with, for instance, when I record a video and I start editing it and I go, oh man, I didn't really get this across the way I wanted. Do you cut your losses and just make the damn video? Or do you go back and re-record it? And thinking about the structure of time and how important is this video to me? I just cut my losses and I just put it out. But for me recently, it's been that my information delivery has gotten away from what I originally wanted it to be a little bit. And things got long-winded, which is typical for me as well when I'm shooting these things. So I'm really trying to trim the information down and make it more concise without feeling rushed. That's a really big one. So
I was doing shorts recently, and I just haven't done as many recently, but I started in December and did them up to just a couple of weeks ago. And what doing shorts taught me is, because you only got 58 seconds, short to the point. It taught me how to be concise, to the point, direct, and edit. Cut. But yeah, to take videos back from half an hour to trim the fat,
yes,
down to 10 to 15 minutes. And get to the point so that you get across and don't lose your audience, and intro short, everything, and just really get to the point. I think a lot of comments I get is, other than live streams, to be able to get quick and to the point of it, and the perils of perfectionism.
Yeah.
When is good enough?
Yeah.
But that's always a matter. And we're always realizing you're always going to learn, you're always going to improve. And so don't let perfectionism keep you from doing what you want to accomplish. So,
yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. Oh gosh, I'm so sad to kill this cigar blend, but here we go. God, I paid secondary for this, unfortunately, because it does not appear here. I mean, it will, but I'll never see a bottle of it. I don't wait in lines for 2 or 3 hours. So, I paid $2.60 for this bottle, but it's a damn good bottle.
Yeah. So I think that's another learning thing about whiskeys is, and Roy Aquavite stresses is, if you didn't get some bottle and you missed that chance, whatever. There's thousands of bottles out there. They're all special. There's a lot of great whiskey. If you miss one, unless it's Ardbeg. You move on. It's no big whoopee-doo that you missed it. There'll be something else. I've chosen you know, some people are 49ers fans, some people are Green Bay Packer fans, some people are Yankees fans or whatever. I've chosen Ardbeg as my team. You know, that's that's my team. You know, I have someone on the hunt for a bottle of the Ardbeg Scorch. So I'll be getting that soon.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh yeah, that's actually the committee release for this year.
Okay.
The Ardbeg. That was a special release. That wasn't the committee release.
Right.
So they're actually, their committee release is actually coming a little late. It's usually in March, and then for Ardbeg Day is in June. They usually have the 46% level. But anyway, I'll get it when I get it. Even then, I'm starting to chill out. Like, don't get all hung up about getting the next Ardbeg. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. I've got plenty of other great Ardbegs.
I've been looking at them all night.
I get one to keep me happy, you know. There are other whiskeys out there. So if you didn't get it, yeah, don't feel like I got to spend another $200 to get something. But being a whiskey tuber changes it, because you're not just thinking about what you're drinking and tasting. You're thinking about what you want to put out there in content in terms of.
Yes.
If I wasn't a whiskey tuber, I would not have all these whiskeys.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have. I would still have a lot of whiskeys. I just wouldn't have. I wouldn't have this many.
That's exact. I mean, that's why. Like, I just find myself buying a bunch of bullshit bottles. Like you were saying, if I could go back and do it again, that's how I feel already. It's like my bottom two shelves here, I could just do without those, you know. And like, yeah, they're going to be great on reviews and all this kind of stuff, but or for instance, like any Booker's, I'm done with that shit because it's continuing to tank. But here I am spending $90 on the next release because I'm going to put a damn video out. You know,
I'm not. So I've been inspired. So First Fill Whiskey, you guys check out his channel. He's got 19 videos. It might have been a month or two since he's put it. And the content's all for beginners. It's all newbie stuff. Mm-hmm. But from a whiskey tuber perspective, the quality of his cuts, edits, lighting, sound is so spot on. And then go watch Peter McKinnon, who's a videographer, filmmaker. Mm-hmm. You can see the parallels and stylistically and how they're doing the videos. So I'm not going to acquire those skills. I wish I could. I would really love if I had those skills, but it's inspired me to improve the quality. So go heavier, start leaning more in terms of quality of content versus quantity of content, and try to up my game in terms of editing and sound and all the behind the scenes stuff. Which means maybe I'm not going to be putting out one every week, maybe every 2 weeks, or maybe just one a week. I was doing for a while, for several months, I was putting out 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And your quality can start to slip. And that happens with whiskey production and wine production, quality versus quantity. I did a live stream a couple of weeks ago on this very subject of quality versus quantity. And the quality can start to slip, or you start to feel stressed over whiskey tubing, and then you don't like it, and you lose the joy of it. And it just, oh shit, I got to put out a video, you know? And you start worrying about how many subscribers, and all that bullshit. But you've heard what's happened recently with Glendronach, right?
With what's his face? Jesus, Billy Walker.
No, Jesus is the wine guy. Not the
Am I correct? Is Billy Walker the master distiller there? Was that what his name was?
So he left, right? So
he left.
Basically, Glendronach is now going. They're getting rid of non-chill filter. They're going lower ABVs. Yeah,
really?
Yeah, they're just leaning more towards quantity over quality and hitting the mass market.
How did they? How do you go about telling people that? Like, do you put out a press release saying our stuff is going to be shittier now?
It just goes. Contention consumers, we're not going to be producing shite. No, it just shows up on the label and people notice.
So they went down to 40%.
Yeah, I didn't know. I don't think they've gone that far. So anyway, so Ralphie. So I was thought about doing a video on this. So Jeremy of Sipper Social Club, or Strippers Social Club, as I like to call them, and Rob of Whiskey in the Six, on one of their recent whiskey rants, they talked about it. But Ralphie did a video on it, and he just like knocked it out of the park. I mean, just nailed it. Okay, Rob, it's been spoken. All I can do is say amen on amen. Preach it, brother. That's all I can say. And just go watch Ralphie. I don't need to do a video. Just go watch Ralphie, and he nails it on the head. But yeah, that's the direction they're taking on it, and they're going to lose the whiskey enthusiasts. But they might appeal to a broader crowd. But we'll see what happens. So now, but everybody's going to go. Let's go over to Glenallachie.
Yes,
let's go to Glenallachie, or as the Italians call it, Glenallachie. That's the direction it's going to go.
Glendronach was, I don't want to say one of the last like bastions of hope. I don't want to say it that way, but it really, in a lot of ways, was. I mean, I like my 2017 or 2019 bottlings of the Allardyce, like those older bottlings of that stuff. And weirdly enough, my 2017 is better than my 19, even though the 19's older. It's got to be cask quality, but that's some of the best sherry finished Scotch that I've ever tasted. I mean, I'm gonna have to go stock up now.
I've ever given 100 points to. The only whiskey I've ever given 100 points to is a Glendronach, straight from the cask that I bottled myself at the distillery.
Wow.
Yeah, and just a mind blowing. It's half gone. I've shared it with friends. It's sad, but that's the way it goes. Anyway, but that quality versus quantity struggle. In terms of not in terms of what we consume, but in terms of what we put out, in terms of being a whiskey tuber, and you try to find that line to where I'm not going to compromise on quality in order to put up more out, but I'm also don't want to keep my fan base waiting for another video. I'm not putting one out every 2 months because I'm going to spend 2 months on a video. That's not enough. And you have to figure it out for yourself, but improve your skills in production. But that theme is existent in wine. It's existent in music. So Boston, right? They put out 3 albums in terms of the original band. The third out, they were on contract for 3 albums, and the third album took 10 years to put out that third album. And they actually had to go to court. The people that they had the contract with for the third album, they were trying to force them to put the album out, and they basically said, "No, we're not going to compromise quality over quantity." And the third album is called Third Stage. It's an absolutely killer album. It came out in 1986 or 87 when it came out. And it's a killer album, but they just were willing to court said, no, we're not putting out an album until it's the quality that we want in the album. And boom, they knocked it out of the park. And sadly, the lead singer, guitarist, songwriter, committed suicide. He died. So it was a bad. But I mean, but that idea of quality over quantity, whether you're talking about wine, whiskey, video content, or music, or food. I mean, the fast food versus fine dining. But then trying to find but the happiness level because of cost is where can I get the highest quality for the best value for the price. And where is that at? I can't drink these. I would like to drink nothing but things like this, but can't afford it. But I'm not drinking, mellow corn all the time either. I'm not going to. Or there are probably worse whiskeys than that, or cheaper made whiskeys than that. Or Johnny Walker Red or something like that. There's a happy medium that you got to kind of figure out in terms of where is that quality. This is good enough, and I can drink this without thinking I'm spending too much money on it and so forth. So I'm going to wrap this up. We're getting close to 2 hours. So everybody, if you're not familiar with Drums and Drams, there's a link in the description box down below. So if you're watching this on the replay, definitely check out his channel. I think he's putting out really good content in terms of quantity of content, quality of content, delivery, and bringing something slightly different than what everybody else is doing. Definitely check him out. Check out his lives. Currently, you're doing something funny with a community infinity bottle, right?
Yeah, I had this idea, to try to have people. Unfortunately, there has to be an exclusivity to it, so their super chats are involved. It's $10, and that defrays the cost of my whiskey. But you help me make the bottle, then you're entering yourself into this giveaway to get a sample of the bottle, and then see how it develops and tracks over time. And then one lucky giveaway winner at the end of the process will get an entire set from start to finish samples of the bottle, which will be pretty neat. But yeah, I've never done it.
Give you to put some Ardbeg in it.
You have to give me. Let's call it. Oh gosh, I don't know. I'd do it for $250.
Because I've been throwing $10 here or there to tell them to put in Ardbeg, but as a
no, I honestly, I guarantee you, put one drop of Ardbeg in that bottle, and someone's gonna have a shit fit when they get a sample.
yeah. Pete really likes to domineer and take over, and that.
Yeah,
but I think that's a really cool idea. It's definitely, I think, a good way to connect with the people there, and people want to tune in and see how this goes. So I think it's a really cool idea. I didn't want to imitate you, so I'm not gonna do it like that. And if I was going to develop an infinity bottle for my collection, it would be a hot mess. It would be, it'd be like, what the fuck is Erik giving us? We ain't drinking this shit.
I would love to see a Scotch infinity bottle, honestly. Like I could
do a peated infinity. I could do a, something like that, or sherry infinity or something like that. But sherry infinity. So what else you got going on that coming up in the near future on your channel?
So a bunch of stuff. So I'm making a video. I'm going to do one called 7 Misconceptions About Scotch. So I've been working on that. I'm going to talk about my favorite whiskey glasses, just like kind of a top 3 of my favorite glasses. I've been kind of nerding out about that recently, which has been fun, but also expensive to buy a lot of glasses and test them all out. And then, just like some upcoming reviews of things. Let me see. The Woodford Batch Proof, the new Penelope Barrel Strength, Chattanooga Rye. Again, a lot of American whiskey. I want to get these off my plate and done before all of the new, Larceny and Elijah Craig barrel proofs roll around in May. And then I want to get into some Scotch stuff before all that hits, and I have to do more limited releases. Because, I have this little issue with like reviewing the Glendronach stuff because I have the older bottlings. Like, should I put that review out? Should I not? So I might approach some different Scotches, like Springbank 15 to Matin 14, like more regular bottlings.
This would be my suggestion with the older Glendronachs. You have to think, what do the viewers want?
Right.
So you have to approach it differently. Go, okay, the good stuff is out there. Get it while you can. Here is the stuff to look for. Here's the stuff you don't want. Do some research, and here's how you can go about finding them. That's the tag part that people are going to hook, because we're okay. You've told me this is good versus the newer stuff. Now, how can I find? So I think that's gonna be the hook. So that's where I would go. I go, here's some great whiskeys, and here's some places you could hunt and look for it, and how to track them down. And here's what the old labels look like this. The new labels look like that. And so to do a comparison between, because I'm sure they're going to be changing labels, and here's what to look for. Here's what to look for, and give that sort of a clue of. So turn it into a whiskey hunter video. You know what I mean? And
right.
That would be sort of that would be my approach as to how I would do something like that. Yeah,
that's a great idea. Yeah, because I don't want to be disingenuous, about it. But I finding a good approach is important to me for that. But I want to review them because I love all these Glendronachs I'm sitting on right now, man. I love all of them.
Yeah.
They're so good. Have you had the Glen Scotia 14, the Tawny Port Campbelltown release?
No. So I've been to the distillery. I've been to all the distilleries there, but my breadth and depth of knowledge of the Campbelltown distilleries isn't quite there. I tend to refer people to Jeremy and Rob because they do a lot of great reviews on that. It's on my list of eventually I will do a thing where I'll 3 months of nothing but Campbellton.
Yeah.
That's the way I do it. I tend to do things in terms of long series, but eventually it'll be a return to Campbellton, or as Roy says, all roads lead to Campbellton. And eventually I'd like to go back there and just because it's sort of a ghost town of Scotch. It's the neighborhood is actually kind of run down. It's very old and worn. I would say I described as economically deprived. The 3 distilleries that are there are sort of what's keeping the town alive, and tourism. But the area, if you just drive around the town and look at the age and how things are worn down, it needs It needs some. It needs a little bit. It's not like the Highlands and Speyside, which is more
Yeah.
touristy. So it needs some economic input, and it needs, and so also around Old Pulteney Distillery as well has that sort of old, worn out look. It's like, ooh, you know, it's not a postcard of Scotland. So, but eventually, I like to go back there and from a historical perspective, look at some of the old sites, so forth. So anyway, so we got like just a minute left. I want to tune out here. So hey, if you guys haven't already, subscribe to Drums and Drams. Definitely check out his channel, check out his content, and anything else you got for the viewers here before we sign out?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it. This is awesome.
All right. Hey, thanks for coming on, man. Hope everyone here has an absolutely fantastic weekend. And hang on there, and we'll chat a little bit offline. And
right.
Cheers, and have a good weekend.